Hi, I'm Caroline Goodson, and I'm an early medieval historian and archaeologist in the history faculty here at Cambridge. I teach predominantly the history of the first millennium, so after the end of the Roman Empire, up to about the year 1100 or so. And my research focuses on that same period. And I work on that period because I like the challenges of it. And I like teaching that period because of the challenges of it. The challenges are many, in part because of the way in which the written word worked in our period. That is, there's not a lot of writing, not a lot of texts, not a lot of archival documentation from our period. There's more from the period closer to the year 1000 than there is from the period closer to 500. But we don't have a lot of chronicle accounts, histories, archival records, documents, literature, fiction, poetry. We've got some, but not a huge amount. Not compared to the 15th century or the 18th century. And so this poses some problems for us as historians who tend to focus on using the written word. The writing that we do have tends to be written by men in the church. And that's great for a certain kind of history, but it's not great for history of women or children or daily life or even things like economy and questions about family strategies. So I enjoy this challenge because it makes me think about the past and the people in the past as part of a really big puzzle. And so I need to think about how to weigh different kinds of evidence more carefully, depending on who generated that evidence. And I really like being able to work with archaeology. So I use excavated sites and I use material culture, that is, objects that came from the first millennium, to round out or complement or add to or replace the kind of evidence that those churchmen wrote about. So I look at the shapes of people's houses. I look at how they buried their dead. I look at the things that they did to make a living and how the things that they made, they traded or shared or exchanged with people further away. And so when I use archaeological data, I can get a picture of the kind of motors and forces that moved and shaped people's everyday lives. Archaeology is really the only body of evidence for the first millennium that is actually increasing. That is, we have more excavated sites each year. We have more information from the material record each year than we have from the textual record. We pretty much know everything that's out there that was written in this period. So archaeology provides us quite a lot of opportunities to think about the everyday, to think about the sub-elites, to think about women and children, families, and family strategies. It also allows us to see the interaction between those people and much larger forces like empires, like the church, like political factors and agents in states. So sometimes we get really great intersections of texts which talk about top-down state structures and archaeological evidence that talk about or that speak to bottom-up lived experiences of people. And one of the things that I try to do with students when I'm teaching this material is to develop their skills, both at weighing carefully the kind of information that we get from the different kinds of source material that we have for the first millennium, and evaluating what real life stuff, what material culture, what objects, and what excavated sites can do in relation to that. And this produces some really interesting new views on what happened in the past. And it often prompts us to ask new questions. So one of the questions that's emerging in my field, in the field of early medieval history, from about 500 to about 1,000, is questions of the environment and questions of how non-human factors like disease, but also like plants and animals related to top-down decisions of governments, of empires, and to bottom-up decisions of families and household economies. So one of the things that I have been working on quite a lot recently is how people grew their own food, household gardens and household economies in the early Middle Ages, and thinking about how new crops and new types of garden produce emerged in our period after the end of the Roman Empire, after the end of the Roman economy. And what that allows me to see is how people took enormous pride and took enormous effort into producing their kitchen gardens, into making their food producing gardens next to their houses within an urban landscape. These were economically advantageous, but they were also symbolically, economically, politically advantageous. So sometimes gardens were given as gifts between rulers, and this concentration on the material world and also the sort of non-human world, the plants and the animals that were in these gardens, gives me a different vision of how power worked in the cities of early medieval Italy. And this was the subject of my most recent book called Cultivating the City in Early Medieval Italy. So thanks very much for listening. Please have a look at the History Faculty website to get a sense of our course offerings for undergraduate degrees in history here at Cambridge. And you can also get a really good sense of who we are in the faculty, the kinds of things that we're interested in, and the kinds of teaching that we bring to students in the faculty by looking at our website.